is the Celebrity Afterlife Report podcast.
Heidi-ho, everybody. It is me, the Celebrity Medium, back with another edition of the Celebrity Afterlife Report. The only show here or in the afterlife, from what I'm told, that brings you the up-to-the-minute gossip about all your favorite deceased celebrities. We've got a new arrival in the afterlife to tell you about this week, as well as a couple of follow-ups to stories we've been following for some time. Without any further ado, let's just dive in and get this thing done. John Mahoney, you may not recognize the name off the top of your head, but you probably will know his work. He played Frasier Crane's father, Martin, on the show Frasier. Recently transitioned to the next world at the age of 77. Arrived without a lot of fanfare because he was never like a leading guy, but he was a pretty solid actor. But there was a nice crowd of fans of his work in attendance for his arrival. The reports I get from my sources say he seemed very humble and appreciative of all those in attendance. Now, we know that after he was on Frasier, and that ran for 9 years or 11 years or something, that Frasier was on for a good while. After that, he had a lot of offers for more sitcom work, but he turned it all down because his real love was live theater, particularly with the Steppenwolf Theater Group out of Chicago, which I gather was a spin-off of Second City, the original improv comedy troupe. The word is that soon after his arrival ceremony, he started just kind of quietly asking people about the existence of any similar acting troupes in the next world. In other words, any groups that were kind of like the Steppenwolf Theater Group on the earthly plane. So naturally, all the busybodies started to say he could end up working for Vince McMahon Sr. in McMahon's Shakespearean acting group that we've spoken so much of. But as of the last word I received, there is no indication that John Mahoney has been in contact with Vince McMahon Sr. or that anybody from McMahon's troupe has reached out to him to offer him a job. That doesn't mean it isn't happening. It just means we haven't heard anything about it happening. Okay, Ralphie May, comedian, pretty popular guy. I think he was on Star Search. God, that's 1,000 years ago. No, Last Comic Standing. And I think he did not win first prize on that, but he was pretty popular. And he transitioned to the next world not too long ago. Rather suddenly, it seemed, from everything I read in the Earthly Plane press. And he wasn't in the afterlife very long before he was offered his own sitcom titled What's the Problem with Ralphie? Now, if you've been listening to this show, you know that there was a little bit of a problem with that. Ralphie May stopped right in the middle of a taping of the show. They were actually doing the last scene of that particular episode, and he just sort of broke character and broke the fourth wall and turned to the studio audience and said, "What's the problem with Ralphie? This show is the problem with Ralphie." And then kind of walked off. As it turned out, he didn't like the direction of the show, so he basically just went on strike. Well, the dispute has been settled, and it appears to have gone in Ralphie's favor. According to my sources, who know some people, or at least one of them knows some people that work on the show, and also press reports in the next world, the show is going to be more realistic in the future. That apparently was Ralphie's gripe. He thought it was a little too unrealistic and sitcom-y. And as a result, at least 2 producers of the show are out now. They've been replaced. And the word is that Ralphie actually consulted with Jackie Gleason. You may have heard of Jackie Gleason. A really big deal in the 60s, Jackie Gleason. Had his own variety show every week. And he, of course, was the star of the classic sitcom The Honeymooners. And apparently he sat down with Gleason, got in touch with him, and asked him about sitcoms and so forth. So the outcome, from what I'm being told, is that the show will be more realistic. In other words, it'll be Ralphie May basically playing Ralphie May, a comedian who also has a family. I don't know what exactly it was like before he went on strike, but I guess it was a little sillier than that. And he thought it should be more based in reality. So that's what it's going to be from this point on. The show will be back on the air in the next 2 weeks or so, I am told. They've been working on scripts for the new direction, and it's going to be back. Now, also, before the holidays, I was telling you about Frank Vincent. He was on The Sopranos, he was in Raging Bull, he was in Goodfellas, he was in the movie Casino. In Goodfellas, he was Billy Bats, if that means anything to you, if you've seen the show. Now, I told you a while back that he got a starring role on a show called Goombas, also a sitcom. And we found out before the holidays that he's going to, well, actually after the holidays, that he's the lead on the show. And this is where it gets a little bit stupid. He plays a former mafia guy who is now a kids' TV show host. In other words, it's everything Ralphie May doesn't want his show to be. Kind of silly and dopey. But apparently it's a big hit, okay? You know, this just tells you that the Afterlife audience is really not very different from the Earthly Plane audience. Silly stuff is very, very popular there from everything I've been told. The show is a big success. He's bringing a lot of his old buddies. They're going to be on it. It's going along, and it's doing just fine, despite the fact that I personally think it sounds dumb. Of course, I haven't seen it, but, you know, apparently I would not be the target audience for this particular venue. Lastly, Tom Petty and his next world band, the Earthshakers. Now, we know that they played a few weeks ago at what's called New Wembley Stadium, which apparently is a pretty exact replica of the famous Wembley Stadium in England on the Earthly Plane. And they blew the doors off the place, man. It was just a really fantastic show. It was sold out, about 90,000 people in attendance. And based on the success of that show, which is their first show in public, they have now been booked for a 50-venue tour. In other words, they're going to be touring the next world, performing in 50 separate places all over. The shows are going to start in the spring, and they're going to run through the end of the year. And in the band is John Bonham and John Entwistle. Bonham, of course, from Led Zeppelin, Entwistle from The Who. And both of them have been quoted in the Next World Press as saying they haven't been so excited to perform in public in ages. And apparently they're doing great. And I still don't have the names of the other guys in the band. This is irritating me. I have to get on my sources and say, okay, give me the name. I want to report who the other people are. Darn it. Gosh darn it. But the Earthshakers are a giant success, it appears, and congratulations to all those guys. All right, I'm gonna lock the door. I'm gonna put a chain and a padlock on it of the studio so that no one can get in until I come back next week with more up-to-the-minute gossip about all your favorite deceased celebs. In the meantime, tell everyone you know that this show can be found on iTunes, on the Google Play Store. It can be found on YouTube, and if you happen to be in the greater Los Angeles area, you can find it on K-Chung Radio AM 1630, where it airs on Mondays on a show called Inspirato Projecto Radio. That's the most exciting thing about this show to me, that it's on actual regular old terrestrial radio for Earthlings to listen to. I am the Celebrity Medium. I'll be back next week. In the meantime, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Celebrity Afterlife Report podcast. To ask a question about your favorite deceased celebrity, call 818-3-MY-DREAM. 818-3-MY-DREAM. 818-369-3732.